I used to be able to make my stomach like really fat, like I can look like I'm pregnant, and like I joke that, oh, I'm having a baby. Like we had talked about it.
To me, it was like real. And that's where the seed was planted. And to me, that's the beginning of something crazy as hell. Flash forward 5 years.
And I'm 7 months pregnant. With baby due next month.
We're like, yes! We're so happy to be a traditional straight family. And nah, when it comes to sexuality, I mean, I'm gay as fuck.
Of course.
He came out to me in college, and before I didn't know. I think I told my sister. I was like, I know he's gonna tell me he likes me. I just had it all wrong from the beginning.
I went to a housewarming last night. They're like, you live with roommates? And I was like, I live with my roommate. It's my baby's father. And then I was like, in my head, I was like, well, wait, I can't just leave it at that. And I'm like, we're best friends. I plan to have a kid with my best friend. And then they're like, oh, okay. And then I couldn't leave it at that. So I was like, he's gay. And then I was like, we just kept going. And then I was like, we didn't do it. And then I told them, like, basically the whole story, how we did it and how we used the kit.
It was an at-home kit that we bought off, I think it was Amazon or eBay. Because we were like, we're not paying no $10,000 to have no damn baby. And I was like, well, I ain't doing it the real way. So I don't know what you're talking about.
It's 2 months, but certainly not one try.
So then once I got the go-ahead to put it online, I think you kind of really, I did and I didn't. It was like unofficial.
He's excited and I love his excitement and I knew I was having a kid with him.
You know, in the very beginning, I was so close to being like, let's not do this. And even now, I'm still in a sense of where there can be a moment where I can be like, I can't do this, I can't do this. I didn't think that these would be real fears, and I remember breaking down crying when, half the time I turn on the TV and another black man is there, right? And just saying like, I'm about to bring another black life into this world.
I was a little like worried when I found out we were having a girl. Sadly, because I just think the world is hard out there for us. And being a black female, I just want her to be like, I guess like the perfect woman or the perfect girl. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't feel like I'm the perfect girl.
It's hard to say what 5 years will look like from now. Well, with baby gonna be here. I mean, of course we expect to be in each other's lives for sure.
We'll never separate, like now that we have all of this. But it's clearly not gonna be like, oh, we're gonna live like 20 miles away from it. Like it'll be like, oh, across the street or something.
If I do find someone, if he finds someone, fine, great. And I don't expect this to hold us back.
I definitely see us progressing in life and it's not stopping what we want to do in life and continuing on with our careers and as far as like us living together and raising our child. I mean, that's the plan, but you never know.
People always wonder like, how are y'all so happy and how do y'all have this relationship and how do you do this? And because we stopped giving a fuck about what y'all think about what everything looks like. Soulmates doesn't always look like intimacy, you know? It looks like two people who share common goals and interests and values.
I really do feel like he's my soulmate. We just have this connection and this energy, and it's just
like me and my best fucking friend in the entire world, like my soulmate, are gonna have a child together, and like we're going to work together to raise someone.
It's good to see that we've come so far, especially him. He's come so far. I think we both have, really. And so I'm like excited for our new future and our new journey.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
We love a good success story. So let's do a real quick recap. Welcome back from lunch. If you enjoyed the entertainment hour, please, please, please be sure to check out Mr. Goodface. You can find his handles on YouTube and Instagram. So before we move into our next session, let's do a recap of our timing. We have a keynote speaker coming up. We have 2 more workshops, and then we're at the closing. We are literally right there. So without further ado, let's talk about our keynote address. This is a season of change featuring Martel Okanji. Martel Okanji brings a dynamic and intersectional perspective into the field of social services through academic studies. With over a decade of experience in his field, he shares the narrative of system-involved youth with lived experience. As a transitional age youth, who experienced homelessness, battled with his mental health, and navigated severe trauma, to now being an openly gay father pursuing his doctorates focused on equity and liberation for Black communities. Martel Okanji will share his journey and highlight the need to cultivate transformative wellness within our communities through a healing-centered engagement. Martel is now an adjunct professor at the Antioch College University, currently pursuing his PhD as a student, focusing on organizational leadership at the intersection of race and equity, commissioner with the LA County on mental health, and involved on several advisory boards. Please welcome Martel Okanji.
Josh, yo, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. First and foremost, I really, truly just want to thank the planning committee, yourself, for really putting on this event and asking me to join as a keynote, which I was like, wait, but I got to support with the event. So I love the pushback, and if y'all ask for it, I'm gonna show up. So thank you so very much.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and take over and do what I gotta do. So first off, I want to thank everybody so much for showing up into this space today. I am excited to bring y'all into my journey and understand a bit about my narrative, but most importantly, really invite y'all to understand a bit about healing-centered engagement and how we can really utilize that to cultivate that transformative wellness. So I am just going to first bring y'all into my life. As y'all saw, I wanted to start with that video to really kind of show where I am today. I find that video very empowering and a reminder of my story and my narrative of what brought me to have a child. I also just have to give a shout out to long ago, I got to work with some youth leaders who really told me that I'm able to be a father through our dialogue and our discussion. So it's amazing what we can get from the communities that we serve when we do it together. So I really just want to name that and recognize that. So I do have a lovely presentation for folks, as I love to use visuals and all the good fun stuff to really be able to describe what I want to tell y'all today. So as you've seen in that video, which I'm really excited to kind of go forth and talk to y'all about. Here is I am Martel Okanji. I am, as I've already stated, a first generation person. Wow, my slander on tripping and talking. Here we go. So I'm first generation. My father's from Nigeria, and I really had to understand the narratives of what does it look like to have citizenship, but to see your parents struggle and have to navigate in different ways of integrating into society. I hold myself on being an activist. I utilize that lens in the work that I do as how am I an activist as a leader, how am I an activist as a director, as a professor, and as an educator and a student. On top of that, I am a student. I love learning and have had a really, really challenging time with education, believe it or not. So, there's still things that I always have this imposter syndrome at times when I think about my education, but most importantly, I believe at where I can go and what strengths I have in education. So being able to take ideas and really explore them and funnel it into something more. I'm a survivor. I'm not just a survivor of sexual assault and sexual abuse. I'm also a survivor of lived experience navigating homelessness. I'm a survivor of navigating my Blackness and proximity to whiteness. I'm a survivor of navigating oppression every day. And what that means and how that shows up comes difference, whether it's a microaggression or where it's an entire system's change that needs to be implemented and what my voice looks like within that system's change. So I always tell folks, how do you think about that and how do you navigate and move? I am a father. I am a gay father. And as you saw in that story, I got to choose with the person that has been there since the beginning of my journey. I've known them since I was in second grade. So we've had decades of life and so many ways that we've shared common values to really say, like, we can bring a life into this world. And as I said, I get to do it with my fucking best friend. So I'm really excited about the path of being a father, a gay father and an African Black father. Whereas I recognize the difference between my African heritage and my Black American heritage, and what those two look like in practice, in tradition and rituals. And more so how when folks see my last name, there's a different conversation when I show up in spaces. So my identity really constitutes the way that I move and invigorates me, as well as sometimes gets me really frustrated when I forget that my identity is a part of me and no one else can remind me of who I am, but better yet, support me in who I am. So I always got to move through that. So I hope in this dialogue, as you understand who I am, and as we talk about healing-centered engagement, you can then start to recognize how can we cultivate this wellness? How can we make it transformative? And how can we bring an equity lens to that work? So I want you to take a journey with me. 10 years ago, I would not have been standing before y'all. I would have not known what that looked like or what that means to say that I'm a director within an organization, to say that I'd be teaching in front of folks. There was a time when I would sit at a park and I'd be like, what the hell am I gonna eat today? There was a time when I had to do survival tactics to be able to just afford a phone so I can wait for the next job to call me. And there was definitely a damn well time where I would go out and celebrate with my friends and forget about any responsibilities I had, because at the end of the day, those responsibilities weren't bringing me food, shelter, or even a sense of community. So the ways that I had to operate and navigate with my sexuality, the ways I had to operate and navigate with my identity, it brought about a journey for me that I will probably never forget. And at times I'm like, man, I wish I never had to go through it. But then again, I recognize the successes that I've brought and the narrative that I get to bring to it. And that didn't come without me learning and navigating through a lot of different experiences. So one, I spent a lot of time working with LGBTQ transitional age youth experiencing homelessness. Through those times, I also got to understand more about my own identity and the fluidity within my sexuality. It truly brought a unique experience in how I engaged, and also what the needs were for our youth who have an intersectional identity, recognizing that we have to do the work differently and we have to be aware and intentional with what that looks like. So we talk about utilizing pronouns. We talk about allowing folks to express themselves. And some folks are just like, why do I have to do this extra step? And I'm really like, it's because when we think about including more folks into the ways that we move and navigate, we really move towards a unique lens and community-driven solutions. So I want us to hold that and to be mindful of what that looks like. The other piece is I work with K-12 students with unique needs. I got the opportunity to work in an education, Upland Unified School District, to name it nonetheless, where I was working with students all the way from preschool to high school and understanding the different learning challenges that they may have, but then also the ways that they had to navigate the spaces. So learning from them and bringing in a lot of that context into the way that I would navigate as an educator, and most importantly, as a person sharing space with them, was so unique to me. And it allowed me to see, how do we start to talk to students in a different way? Another part of my learning was working with Black and Brown narratives within our juvenile justice system, recognizing the barriers and challenges, the family dynamics, the access that they have to violence, which is some of the things that we don't want to have access to, right? But understanding how they also had to navigate that as a norm. So recognizing the neurological pieces that are involved with that and having conversations with them to unlearn certain behaviors, to be able to own themselves within that space, and then to also recognize the systems that are holding them back. And we need to do more in those conversations, right? How do we begin to do that? So community organizing through activism. As a student, as I said, I'm an activist at heart, and I held that true and evident in everything that I did. So as I went ahead and I did lots of different, working with different legislators, having conversations with leaders, and really saying a change needs to come and what does that look like? But most importantly, working with the community, understanding what challenges they have and listening attentively, right? So I'm not moving in this work for myself. I'm moving with my community. They've given me a platform and a privilege to own voices. So for me, it's really important that I bring those voices with me in everything that I do, especially when we talk about systems, when we talk about systems at an agency level, right, within our organizations, but also when we talk about systems within the institutions at a larger county, state, and federal level. So bringing in those narratives and the ways that we need to see the work was so important. But it also came in when I worked with adult populations, right? So those folks who are experiencing homelessness, and what that told me was there's unique needs between our youth and our adults, which our panel has so eloquently named. And I think that's something that we have to really start thinking about when we go into these different populations and have these different conversations. How do we ensure our adults and our TAY have the things that they need to be successful? But it doesn't just stop there, right? We also got to look at it from a national level, right? Being able to go around the nation and have conversations in different communities. I've gotten the chance to go to Texas and Washington, D.C., New York, and so many other places, and working with these organizations to really start to have conversations on what specific needs they have. What are the implications of these disparities, and what does it look like? So then I started to recognize that, wait a minute, it's not a conversation that we need to have nationally that needs to be a national standard. We also have to recognize the smaller micro level pieces that are needed so we can provide support within these communities. And we can start to redefine community at a complex level, right? So we're looking at the different pieces that are important. So a lot of that practice, a lot of that engagement with these communities and a lot of the narratives was like, yo, I'm hearing these things. What does that look like? And how do we figure out that work? And that's what brought me to my education. That's what got me to say, you know what? I need more information. I need to explore literature and understand what that looks like. So some folks use education as a way to say, I want to learn about these things and I want to have these credentials. Why utilize my literature and my education to actually understand my own personal narrative? To understand how do I, at the end of the day, get people to stop experiencing the things that I've experienced? To not have to say that I'm a survivor. To not have to bear witness to their trauma and to lead with that, but to bear witness to what they can be and the limitless possibilities that our world can offer them. But that really starts with a lot of different approaches. So doing that, that's what got me to think of what are some answers and what are some ways we can really start to change the way we look at the work. What are some ways as teachers, as educators, as service providers, as adults, as community residents, we can actually start to stop and really look at an authentic and intentional way of moving towards healing-centered engagement. So as I take y'all upon this approach in this conversation, I brought in photos to really tell the narrative of bringing my life into this framework, but more so bringing the lives of so many people that we see on a daily piece. So I hope you can utilize my story in this way to talk about how you can actually implement change within your own systems. So you asked, this photo here, I got the greatest opportunity to volunteer. As you can see, I look very young. This is when I loved myself in so many different ways. And I continue to love myself today in so many different ways. This was Peer Health Exchange, and I got the opportunity to volunteer with them and work within high schools and junior highs and to talk about health, but health education, and really recognize that there is a disparity within the way folks are able to access health. So we have to talk about that lens of health and look at what is our physical body saying for us and what does that look like? And I got the option to do that, and these are some of the amazing colleagues that I actually still got to touch base with in my recent years that actually did this work with me. So what is healing-centered engagement? So in 2018, some article was published by Dr. Sean Ginwright. And of course, as we know, as a scholar, as I know, this work didn't just come up and show up in 2018. The work has really been a conversation moving from there. But to really define healing-centered engagement, it's holistic, involving our culture, spirituality, civic action, and collective healing. We're really looking at the ways we can expand our responses to trauma and offer a more holistic approach to fostering our well-being. It's not just looking at trauma as an individual isolated experience, but rather highlighting the ways in which trauma and healing are experienced collectively, right? So we don't just bring our young person and recognize, okay, well, why are they doing this and how are they doing this? And what in an individual way we're going to talk about healing them. We say, how do we bring them into this community, share a lens of community, and really talk about fostering a sense of healing, right? And what does that actually look like? So I'm gonna bring you 4 different examples, 4 different steps or pieces that I want y'all to look at and examine to really talk about healing-centered engagement. And this photo that I chose on the right is I had the opportunity to work with different leaders and managers within organizations. And our focus and our purpose over a 4-day course was to talk about ourselves as leaders and what that looked like within our organizations, right? So if we're looking at the community of our organization, how do we talk about management practices and our leadership? And what type of historical groundings that management come from? And how do we implement change? And I want you to hold on to that nugget of why I'm sharing this photo, because it's so important that we as leaders are really being intentional in the way that we actually move and navigate. But this was an amazing experience for me as I got to collect different ideas and perspectives and work as a community to define how we heal as people of color, right? As a Black gay man, as a leader, and what that actually looks like. So the first piece of healing-centered engagement is really being explicitly political rather than clinical. So what does that mean? And I think we all sometimes take a standard of looking at our work in the field and saying, okay, how do you bring in more frameworks on therapy? How do you bring in more frameworks on counseling? What does the field specifically say about these behaviors and addressing these issues, right? And Sage said so beautifully, right? We gotta step out of crisis space only, right? We gotta really expand what we look at. So a part of that is really recognizing that communities and individuals are agents in restoring their own trauma. We have to bring them along to that, right? We need to do more to provide language and tools and education on understanding the system that impacts them to remove self-blame. We know, and if we don't know, I'm telling you, there are systems, and there's a reason why we say systems involves use. When I'm just gonna state from the beginning, this whole world is a system. And we know that the system does so great in blaming everyone for their own challenges, right? How do we get them to understand how the system does that? And what tools and language, and how do we educate them to be able to navigate this system, to truly be a part of their process and restoring their own faith and their well-being, right? So as Travis and all of them named, we need to do more in engaging them in advocacy efforts, right? Utilizing advisory boards. And I say this with so much intention. It's not just about having the advisory board and bringing it as a check at the box, right? It's not just about sitting them at the table and beginning your conversation. How do we develop tools, share similar language, and bring them in a way that's so inclusive and intentional, right? So we're not just saying, join us at the table, but we're also saying, here's how we talk. And how do you talk? And creating this shared community vision, right? And recognizing that we have to be collective. We have to use the same language. We have to talk the same way, but most importantly, we all need to make sure it's inclusive to where adultism doesn't exist, right? Believing that adults are the only ones who have the answers, right? So how do we start to dismantle that and really create a space where young people can develop their skills? We can provide more platforms for agents to use their voice. And most importantly, give folks a seat at the table, or damn well, even better yet, the skills to create their own. So I bring that with the photo that I share with y'all, is I had the opportunity, and everything to me is an opportunity, because the opportunity to learn from other folks, to engage in places where folks follow you and get to share language and narratives with you is an opportunity, right? To lead these amazing individuals that you see in this photo as the president of our LGBTA when I was in school. And all the things that I learned from that is we built community and we built shared language, and I learned a lot. There were things I had to be accountable for as a leader to recognize, how do I even share space with those folks who identify as trans or non-gender conforming, right? How my language was not inclusive of them as well either. And there were so many ways that I got to learn and unlearn as a Black male who navigated through religious and ways that were not inclusive in terms of my own culture, to really open up space and to really be able to say, how can I do better and be better and allow for a community voice? So these are some of the most phenomenal times where we got to even build and work with our Cal State University system and saying, we need to have language inside of documents, inside of our policies that state we need to find support for LGBTQ identities. And the biggest, most amazing resource ever is really creating the first permanent LGBTQ resource center. Because we as students navigating homelessness, navigating mental health, being transitional age youth. And I know a lot of my peers inside of those spaces have so many challenges, where even one of them, and this is a trigger warning for some of our folks, actually took their lives. And a very, very close friend of mine. So navigating through that experience really brought me a different lens to how we recognize even student homelessness. And I think when we brought Sam into the conversation, it was so powerful to see how we talk about that as well too. The other piece that we really have to think about with healing-centered engagement is that it is culturally grounded and views healing as the restoration of identity, right? What does that mean? That means that we're really building a positive identity, right? Young people can actually see themselves positively in the future. And we're not just talking about mental health. We're talking about emotional, spiritual, physical. We're looking at a holistic approach, right? And not even then are we focusing on today. We're even going to bring in over the concepts and the groundings of historical and contemporary relevance, right? We're going to say, who are you? And where did you come from? And what did that mean? And how did you navigate that life, right? We're going to engage youth in storytelling, getting them support with therapy and counseling, creating events and activities where we can do community building and fostering meaningful connections with adults and their peers. So a part of that narrative that I get to share with y'all, and as you can see, back in the day when we had to take photos and then upload them into our computers, man, those days. So I couldn't get a clear image. But inside of this, I got the opportunity to engage in a leadership program. And when I tell you this completely changed my life, where I told the story in front of thousands and thousands of people, and over 3,000 people to be exact, of how I was engaging with my mental health, how I struggled with substance use and alcohol abuse, how I struggled with mutilation to my own body, through all the different challenges I was experiencing as a gay Black man who didn't feel support, who didn't understand that. So getting access to these different ways of therapy and counseling, being able to foster a sense of community with those folks you see on this stage, and then telling that story not in a way that was used to be traumatizing, but in the way I started my story with y'all today, with joy and celebration, that I was able to come through and recognize the strengths of how I empowered myself through my own story. So if we're really culturally grounding ourselves and restoring our identity, our sense of belonging, what magic happens for our young people and the folks that we want to move forward with? And to do that, healing-centered engagement tells us that we have to be assets-driven, and we got to focus on well-being we want, rather than the symptoms we want to suppress, right? So we need to take the lens from trauma to strengths-based. And that doesn't mean we disregard trauma, right? We have to acknowledge the behaviors that come from trauma, right? We have to understand that our young people are tired, are hungry, don't want to engage with folks because the system has done nothing for them beneficial, right? So they're coming to us because they want help. Because they want help. We might look at it as they're here today, they don't care about nothing, they just come here every day, but recognizing the fact that they could have stayed where they are. But the fact that they're hungry says they want to help themselves. The fact that they want somewhere safe to be says they want to help themselves. So it's really looking at not youth that don't want to be engaged, right? We have to lose that language. We have to say they don't want to be engaged. We have to start saying, how do we engage them? Who are they? And what strengths do they bring when they walk in this space that we can identify and really start to hold for them, right? How do we set goals and support them to get there? How do we include expectations and provide the tools and grace for them to meet those expectations, right? We know how our system works. We know that it's not designed for everyone to exist. So how do we have those conversations with our young people and then also go on the side and change those systems? We have to do so much more work because of the system we lived in. And healing-centered engagement is recognizing we have to do that from strengths. And our young people today in these workshops and in the conversations our leaders had, it's really recognizing that we have to do more to identify that. Our young people deserve more than just recognizing them as a trauma. They are more than that. And that even says a part of that is, oh, and I forgot this image here This is when I graduated with my master's degree. So some folks know and some folks don't know. I actually got kicked out of my bachelor's degree. Clearly, it wasn't just an easy walk in the park to get into college and then to graduate, right? Unfortunately, as you can see in that image that said 2009, this is my master's at 2017. So if we put the math together, you might be able to figure out there's some gaps within my education piece. And a part of that was me focusing on the folks who said, Martel, what do you want? What does that look like? So when I work with the young people, that's where I move into. What can you do? What works for you? Because this moment right here, I got the opportunity from getting kicked out of college to being a student speaker, graduating with my master's degree. And another photo of that shows me bringing my daughter on stage. That was the most powerful moment of seeing me being successful. So how do we even create more powerful moments of our young people being successful, right? We got to do that and celebrate every small step, because every step matters. And the last piece that I'll tell for folks, and I'll open it up for questions after these reflections. The next piece about healing-centered engagement, it's also talking about supporting the adult providers with their own healing, right? One of my closest colleagues has said, everyday healing. How do we practice everyday healing? Because we need to heal every day. If we look at Michael Sigmund, he talks about learned helplessness. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole different workshop. But recognizing that folks who experience trauma start to learn that they can't help themselves. So in order to heal through that, we have to start to practice everyday healing. And that means that goes for our adult providers. If we're not recognizing the workplace as a place that is also creating trauma, secondary trauma, vicarious trauma, we have to do more than just notice it. We got to get ahead of it. We have to create more than just our standard policies and procedures for our staff. We as leaders, we as managers, we as supervisors, and we as peers within the workplace have to recognize, how do we create an environment where we all could exist? We have to be intentional in ways that we can support one another and really drive the work forward, so our young people can also be able to see what role modeling looks like. So we can create environments for staff where we recognize power, privilege, and oppression, and we can set up our staff to be able to role model that in the community that we work in. We have the work to do, and no one said it was going to be easy, and no one said we have to be perfect. But it's important that we recognize that we spend time to reflect on the ways we move, because we're not in this work for profit, unless the only profit is dismantling this system. But we know how that slow profit is going to come. So how do we start to really be intentional in the work that we do? So healing-centered engagement really is culturally relevant, intentional, and even talks about specializing our training and our development on healing practices and workplace wellness. It's not just about creating an opportunity, it's about instilling that in the culture of the organization. It's about talking about the different policies, practices, and leadership that encompass diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. What are we doing within organizations, within spaces, for our staff and the adults who are providing support to the young people that we serve? It has to be everyone included in that. So I didn't have a photo on that, but I did have something that meant so much to me. This letter that you see here before you was the day I got accepted into my doctorate program. Some folks go to get a doctorate to be professors. Fortunately, I'm able to do that because, these doctors are expensive as shit, and they require a lot of money out of pocket. But I didn't get my doctorate for myself. Of course, there's a piece of self within that. It's very evident. I got it because I recognized that in nonprofit organizations and educational organizations, there were business models that that were able to be replicated in a way that can really drive the mission and the work forward. I wanted to understand, how do I, as a leader within an organization, be able to create models and frameworks and approaches for the staff to feel competent, to feel able to drive out the work, and most importantly, to feel good doing it. And I think those are the ways that I wanted to say this PhD is going to help me to continue to provide this healing-centered engagement, because I know that if I have the skills and the talent and the critical lens to look at how do we support our communities and the staff within that, we're going to be able to drive our work forward in ways we have not done before. And that is a big, big component that I feel like within organizations, sometimes we forget, right? We center in on our youth, but it's not just our youth. We have to open up that lens because we're doing it for our youth through these different many folks who are also showing up to the work. And if they're not able to do the work, we're not able to save the young people in the ways that we need to. And I said something that I don't like. Save the young people. We don't need to save the young people. We need to work with our young people so we can all save the world that we exist in. So really even shifting the language, right? And recognizing through that when we make mistakes, it's okay. We just got to own them and move forward. So I hope what we can take away from what I'm telling you today is to take the next step to think about who you are and what you want and how you wish to dismantle barriers impacting systems involved youth. We got to recognize through all the ways that I talked about being political more than clinical, right? Utilizing strengths-based, having everyday healing practices and processes for folks, and being okay when we can't heal every day, right? Because we know our system doesn't allow us to, but every day we can is something to celebrate. But recognize that this happens on an individual level, right? Between ourselves, for ourselves, right? So if we're not thinking of ourselves in this work and how we can do this work, then we're already struggling. So how do we as an individual practice healing-centered engagement? And then interpersonal, how do I, between the staff that I work with, between the other leaders that I work with, between the young people that I work with, how do I show up and carry that? What policies and practices, what power do I have within that? And what does that look like? And then at the institutional level, how do I create, from a micro lens in my agency, an environment that builds on that? And then how do I step into our counties, into our federal systems? You know, I got the opportunity now to be commissioner with Los Angeles Mental Health, with Supervisor District 3, Sheila Kuehl. I'm going to utilize that, and I'm going to do the work that I have to do to make sure our institutions recognize that, right? So how do we think about these 3 levels to be able to focus on healing-centered engagement? And most importantly, finally, a quote I want to leave you with the phenomenal Audre Lorde. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. It is not easy to practice self-care every day. It is not easy to intentionally heal every single day. Because as you note, it is an act of political warfare. This system was not created for a Black gay man to navigate as the way I navigate today. And I see that as I show up in spaces, as I utilize my voice, and as I own and value what I've navigated and been through to show up at the table. But that does not mean I will not care for myself. I will make sure that I lead at the forefront with how I care for others as well. And I would not see that as a way of self-indulgence, but as a way of self-preservation. Because through my lifetime, I'm not here to just solve the day-to-day issues of homelessness. I'm here to end homelessness. And I hope through now we can really talk about this season of change that's existing throughout the end of this day to cultivate transformative wellness. Thank you very much. From that, if there's questions, Josh, if you got questions that you see show up or anything of that nature, more than happy to answer that throughout the last couple minutes that we have. And I know you're on mute. You're still on mute, Josh.
Yeah, bear with me. Technical difficulties. But no, but as a gay Black man and someone that's fresh out of college getting their bachelor's and seeing another wise Black man that is also identifying, with what I identify as, I'm telling you, it's so inspirational, like you are a pioneer. And not only a pioneer, like you're such a strong leader that is able to lead the masses and instill hope in our new generation, but also the generation that's here to create change. So I want to tell you from my perspective, even sitting back and listening, it's nothing short of a blessing. Thank you so much for even giving your perspective, you know what I mean? And also sharing your life with us, because that's a beautiful thing, you know?
I thank you. I thank you for that. I know it's always challenging to share, but I know at the end of the day, as I said, storytelling really brings about some healing in ways
Doesn't it?
we might not ever touch before.
Oh my goodness. That was good stuff. It was good stuff.
Awesome.
Something like
Well, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat box, so you know me, I'm always happy to jump and run, but I'm also curious if our tech sees any Q&A or any questions that might show up in the Q&A, because I can't actually see the Q&A, so I'm actually not sure.
I don't know, but I'm seeing a lot of love. We love you, Martel. Thank you so much. Amazing. Thank you.
Yes. Well, then I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic. Folks know how to get in touch with me if you need to. I appreciate and value everyone. And Joshua, thank you so very much for really owning and grounding us in the space. So
thank you, Martel.
Much love to y'all.
All right, y'all. We are back and we're bigger than ever. So we're moving on to our session workshop 2. But before we do that, I want to thank Martel again for his wonderful insight on his keynote. Definitely a lot of takeaways and definitely things that I feel like we all can utilize in our work. So I appreciate you for sharing with us and just standing truthfully in your authenticity. So we have like I said, we're transitioning into our last 2 workshops of the day. One of them, well, option A is going to be cultural humility and harm reduction. And this is going to be a training that seeks to create a space for reflection, conversation with participants about the concept of cultural humility with the goals of initiating and sustaining a culture of continuous learning, reflection, and humility, while helping trainees understand the following. What is the concept of cultural humility? Why is it relevant to harm reduction? And why is it needed to be practiced in our daily life and work? And then on the flip end, we have option B for our creative people. This is creating a safe space, a safe and brave place art workshop. It's an window between worlds. We believe that creative expression is a human right. Attendees will be able to invite the participants in trauma-informed, culturally responsive, and hands-on art workshop, utilizing the AWBW philosophy framework. So during this workshop, participants will be able to have the opportunity to creatively explore a place that is real or imaginative. And you'll be able to see what that feels like, what is safe, what is brave, making art that they can carry as a tool to ground themselves and connecting with those feelings. So whichever one you feel like you identify more with, on the left-hand side of your screen, you'll be able to click and join once you have selected that workshop that you wanted. So I'm here. I will see you all soon in the time of doing so.
I got pulled back in because they said there was a question. So I was like, oh, let me answer that question.
Yeah, of course.
It looks like the question was, how do I deal with imposter syndrome? Which is a powerful question. I'm like, could I answer that in the last? You know, Angel, I think at times you'll always be told to belittle yourself. You'll always be looked at as if you won't have the answers. And you might even be told at times that you might come off as having too many answers, right? Which also plays a great thing on the mind. And what I say with that, you know, in terms of imposter syndrome, is I have to always constantly ground myself in saying, like, I did not get here through someone flipping a coin for me. I need to value the narrative and the stories that I had, because I deserve to be here. I deserve to speak. I deserve to own who I am. And I build that through a lot of affirmations and talking to myself and watching some videos sometimes. My friends love to send me random things. But you really have to sit with and talk to yourself and say, I deserve to be here. I deserve that. And a lot of that also comes with the people you have around you who are really rooting for you and bringing you up. Because at the same time, like, if you are around people who do tell you those things, if you're in environments that tell you those things, when you go to work and they tell you those things, you have to step back and say, you know what? No, I value myself. And there's too many different things that are telling me that I'm not supposed to be somewhere. So when I do show up, and if I'm saying things that are correct, and if I'm saying things that are right, I'm going to hold myself. And when I'm not right, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go explore and figure out what is right. So I deal with that through a number of ways, but it's really talking to myself and also saying, like, no, I'm here and I deserve to be here and I value that. awesome.
I love that. I wanted to chime in just because I feel like, you know, I come from a family where I was out on my own since I was 14 years old. I didn't really have the supportive family telling me like I did a lot of great accomplishments, but I never got that clap or that, yeah, you're going in the right direction. So I think that as a youth nowadays, I do sometimes move out in the world, still doing great things, but sometimes I don't really acknowledge what I've done, you know what I mean? And what I've done for myself or how far I've come. So I would always say, check in with yourself, always check your support groups, and always hold yourself accountable. Like we said, I mean, making mistakes is not an issue, but it's being accountable for those mistakes and asking yourself, how do I take my mistakes and make that into a triumphantness, you know, into a testimony type of thing. So
Yes.
I love all of it.
Right. Learning is never a bad thing. And that's all the questions we have. I appreciate y'all. Now I'm gonna run.
So once again, let me just recap. You know, we have those two groups that are about to happen. That's cultural humility and harm reduction, and we also have creating a safe and brave place art workshop. On your left-hand side, you'll be able to click sessions, pick the group that you would like to join, and we will see you soon.